Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. We have a lot of questions, also from regional media. Please identify yourself with name and medium before I pass the floor, and please state to whom you want to address the question to. We will start with Ernest Bunguri from Euronews, I believe. Ernest, are you there?
Thank you. Yes, I have one question for the presidency and one for the Commission. Prime Minister Plenković, you are heading the only country that 20 years ago was sitting on the other side of the table with a group of the Western Balkans, and today you are heading also the European Union. If you recall the statements of that time, declarations of Thessaloniki, how would you evaluate, have you achieved the messages of this Zagreb declaration to be weaker, equal, or stronger than those 2 decades before? And President von der Leyen, I wanted to ask you, is this pandemic affecting somehow the timeline of the Commission in terms of the enlargement work, or maybe some reforms in the countries? And what would you like to see happening during this year in 2020 in terms of concrete steps, let's say, for example, with North Macedonia, Albania, Montenegro? You can add other countries if you wish. Thank you.
Shall we answer immediately?
Yes, in that order, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for posing this question. Well, I not only was physically present back in 2000, I participated from Brussels' perspective to prepare the Thessaloniki summit. I was in Sofia, and here I'm again in the role together with Charles and Ursula as the co-organizer of this event. I think if we look at the nuances of the language in all of these documents, you can see the progress. And that's why I said in my opening statement that the summit in a way concludes the joint work that we did since October till today. I think the Zagreb Declaration is very solid, very substantive, sends a strong political support to all the countries in the region. The fact that we finally made a decision to open negotiations with North Macedonia and Albania, and that we have the new methodology and the summit in the first 6 months of the mandate of Charles and Ursula, I don't think we could actually be asking for more. So from my perspective personally, I'm very pleased and happy that we managed to navigate through a lot of difficult political and the diplomatic negotiations and achieve the document and the messages which we all heard during last 3.5 hours.
Yes, to your question, the pandemic and concerning the timelines of the enlargement process, of course, the pandemic is a huge challenge to the timelines of the enlargement process. But if we are smart and if we stand together, we might also use it as a push forward to grow closer together, because what we all have in common now is that after the lockdown, we see a vast economic damage in all our economies, and we are heading towards a recovery program. And as the investment package of the European Union will also look at the recovery needs of the Western Balkans. And if we align, and that's the goal, our common policies of interconnectivity, our policies of digitalization, the policies of the European Green Deal, we can leap forward, we can bounce forward together in common strategies how to bring back the economies on our feet. And so far, right now it's a challenge, but I hope looking back one day we say we made the best out of it and we grew faster together.
Thank you. Passing the floor now to Bernd Riegert from Deutsche Welle, I believe. Bernd.
Yes, good evening. Thank you. I have 2 short questions, one for the Prime Minister and one for Mrs. von der Leyen. Mr. Plenković, should the countries in the Western Balkans be more grateful for the help that they get from the EU? Should the Serbian president, for example, kiss the European flag rather than the Chinese? And Mrs. von der Leyen, did you take the opportunity to talk about the European budget and the money and the recovery fund and all these helps that also have to be financed somehow for the Western Balkans?
Well, it is not up to me to talk in the name of any other leader that took part in today's meeting, especially coming from our neighboring countries. But what is certain and what we could all hear is a very clear and strong articulation of all the 6 countries in the Western Balkans that their objective is the European Union. This is their finalité politique in terms of orientation. And one thing is certain, this summit is helping them to go in the right direction. I think there is a lot of appreciation in all the capitals in the region for what the European Union is doing. These countries are in a way surrounded by the European Union. If we look at geography, there is nowhere else they can go. So from my point of view, this is something that you will have to ask personally, but I think there is an understanding and appreciation for what the European Union is doing in political, economic terms, and especially in terms of financing many projects in infrastructure, and also assisting in fighting COVID-19 pandemics.
So my answer can be very short. No, the European budget discussions were not part of the discussions of today. Today we had, Charles, correct me if I'm wrong, but approximately 35 participants in this summit, and rightly so, the whole focus and concentration was on the EU-Western Balkan relationship and, of course, the accession processes and growing closer together.
Okay, passing the floor now to Tanya Milewska from MIA. Tanya?
Yes, hi, do you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, I have a question for the 3 of you. I mean, today Freedom House published its report, and Serbia and Montenegro have been for the first time rated as hybrid regimes, meaning they are not entirely democratic. This means that the 2 countries that the European Union is negotiating with are now hybrid regimes. And this will lead me to a second question. Do you think that it's time to speed up the process with North Macedonia and Albania in order to have maybe more successful stories when it comes to negotiating enlargement? Thank you.
Thank you for this question. We had the occasion to repeat that the reforms are essential, and the fight against corruption, the rule of law, the democratic values, those issues are essential in a European perspective, and our message is very clear, and that's why it's so important to continue the implementation of the reforms. As European Union will be very committed in order to be certain that it's possible to make more progress on those topics.
Yes, indeed. The rule of law is the cornerstone of the European values, and it is conditio sine qua non for any kind of accession process. So these reforms have to be done, and the progress has to be shown. That is true for every country that wants to be a member state in the European Union. What the second part of your question is concerned, it's a process that is pretty complex. So there are many, many different topics that have to be discussed in the respective chapters. Therefore, just only speeding up because of the question to be fast is not the right way to go. But the new methodology opens the possibility to have in parallel a few chapters so that you can speed up the process. And I hope this will be possible with a new methodology now.
Just a quick addition. I think in terms of methodology of the accession negotiations, chapters 23 and 24, who are dealing with fundamental rights, who are dealing with issues such as freedom of press, with the fight against corruption, with the rule of law, with democratic standards, actually exist in order to be used as a leverage in speeding up the essential democratic reforms. And therefore, the process of negotiations, I insist, it's a transformative process. The more countries who are demandeurs of joining the European Union are engaged, the more reforms will be successful. Staying somewhere in the parking lot is not an incentive for strong reforms, even in this area. We have seen that elsewhere before.
Thank you. We're passing the floor now for two last questions, to Vince Chadwick. Vince, can you hear us?
Yes, hi, thanks.
Hi.
My question is for President Michel about the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, which has invested 13 billion in the Western Balkans, but is also considering an expansion into sub-Saharan Africa. I'd like to ask whether you think that's a good idea or not, and what message that sends about the European perspective that we're talking about. More broadly, I'd like to ask when, if at all, you're planning to bring the question of the future of the EBRD and especially the EIB in Africa and also relatedly in Europe to head of state level, because as you would know from your previous role, this question has been discussed for a decade. And again, it's come forward, but again, officials say they have no clear idea what leaders want for the future of the EBRD and the EIB. Thanks.
No, thank you for this important question. And indeed, I think it is very important in the European perspective to be more active at the external level. It's what we are trying to do with this important summit that we had today. But I think indeed that it will be also important in the future to consider that the relationships between the European Union and the African continent will be essential for our common future. And I have the impression that in the framework of the next negotiations related to the next European budget, it will be essential also to identify which kind of strategy we would like to develop towards Africa. And in my personal opinion, I think indeed that it is important to invest more in Africa in our common interest. It's important for Africa, it's also very important for Europe. And the question will be asked, what are the tools that we can use? The European Investment Bank, with his expertise, is a possible tool that we can use. But it will be important to have a very strong dialogue with the African partners in order to identify what's the best way of working, in order to be more efficient, in order also to be more visible as a European Union. And I don't forget that at the moment, the European Union and the member states, we are the most important partner for the development in Africa.
Thank you. One more question, going to Ivana Dragicevic. I hope I pronounce your name correctly.
Hello, yes. Hi from Zagreb. I'm Ivana Dragicevic from N1 Television. We're going live in several countries of the Western Balkans tonight. My question goes to Ms. von der Leyen and Mr. Michel. You've said that Western Balkans belongs into EU and enlargement is one of the most important policies of the UN. In the declaration, you say that EU is determined to further intensify its engagement at all levels, be it political, economic, or social transformation. So is there political will within the Council to understand that it is important for Western Balkans countries to be a part of Future of Europe conference? Thank you.
Thank you for this question, and my answer is very clear. Yes, there is a European perspective, there is a strong European perspective. And if you look at the situation a few months ago, we were divided at the European level. It was very difficult to have the same position about the possibility to open the negotiations talk with Albania and with Northern Macedonia. And because of our political involvement, we have agreed a very strong position in March, a few months ago, and we have taken the decision to open the talks with North Macedonia and with Albania. And our message is very strong, is also very clear. And certainly after this COVID-19 crisis, it's essential to develop a very strong strategy with this region in order to invest in the short term, in the mid-term, in the long term, and in parallel, it's important for the region to reduce the tensions, to continue all the efforts in order to implement the reforms. But I repeat, at the highest European level, we share this opinion that there is a very strong European perspective, and I think that this summit today was the occasion.
Sorry, I'm talking about the Future of Europe conference, which is under the auspices of the new Commission and Vice President Šuica.
I didn't hear your question. Can you repeat your question?
I'm talking about importance of Western Balkans being a part of Future of Europe conference that is being held under the auspices of the Commission on the suggestions of several European countries, of which France is one of the most important. Thank you.
About the conference on the future of Europe, we are in discussion with the European Parliament in order to agree about the modalities, the concrete modalities. And of course, during this conference, it will be important to discuss all the possible topics. My opinion is certain it will be important to involve the European citizens, to work with the different European institutions, to involve the European citizens, and if it's possible, to develop also a kind of dialogue with other regions in the world, and especially with the Western Balkans. It's a topic that we will discuss with the other institutions.
Madam President.
Yes, thank you. Indeed, as the conference on the future of Europe will be a conference with the European people on how they see the future of the European Union, automatically there will be the topic of enlargement and how to integrate our Western Balkan friends. So it will be a module of the conference for the future of Europe.
Thank you to all participants. Thank you to the two presidents, and from Zagreb, of course, with the Prime Minister. Thank you and stay safe, and see you next time.